In this video, I'm going to look at a very simple database with one table and a very simple set of records at that, but it's going to be in SQLAlchemy. So I have previously set up a virtual environment and I've activated it. And in that virtual environment, I've installed Flask and Flask WTF, though I'm not WT Forms, and I'm not even using that, but it is in the environment that I will eventually be using. And then also I've installed SQLAlchemy and sort of tested that it was properly installed. So I want to go through this simple little example, and is going to sort of have some messages, sort of simple database table with just a very simple records. So I start off here with this commented out part, which was just me testing that the Flask was properly installed. But now I'm really going to start SQLAlchemy. And there's no Flask, there's no interface to this database other than just this sort of command line. So we are bringing in from SQLAlchemy the create engine, and we are making a database. And we're using SQLite, which is normally used for like development, and then you switch over to a more serious database for production. This is just all sort of development fun. I have no name of my database here, and so this is going to be an in-memory database. So I'm going to create this database. It's going to be active while I'm running, and then it's just going to sort of go away. But if I wanted a database to sort of hang around and be able to add records to it another day, then there would be some more, some like filename.db sort of seen here at the end of line 11, but just these slashes means it's in memory. Okay, because I'm just sort of getting started and I don't really want to keep this stuff around. I'm setting up here that I want the declarative base. I'm going to bring in from the SQLAlchemy code this base class, parent class, super class. This sort of has the basic things for me to make a database out of, a database table out of. And then, so I'm bringing over that, and then I'm going to sort of extend that. But that's what I'm bringing in right now, the sort of basic stuff for me to make a database. And then here I'm specifically bringing in things, this little table in my database, I'm going to have just an ID, sort of like, I don't know, quotes or something like that. It's just going to have, the quote's going to have an ID and then the actual quote. I don't even know, like, I'm not going to say who said the quote or anything like that. It's just very simple in and out database. But the ID is going to be an integer, and the message itself is going to be a string. So one of the things I'm bringing in is column. This is just sort of that I'm going to have a field in a database, like sort of sometimes you might call it a column, a field, a property. So that's just saying column is just saying I'm going to have properties. I'm going to have columns in if I'm thinking of it sort of in Excel or in Access or something like that, they would sort of show up as columns. So I'm going to have columns, and one of my columns is going to have integer values, and one of my columns is going to have a string value. So that's what I'm bringing in, columns and integers and strings. In line 29 there, I am extending the base class. So then we brought in above the base class, and now I'm making, based on that, I am making my message class. So message is my specific name. And I'm going to add or make more specific my specific thing from their more generic thing. I'm going to name this class in the database. Again, it's going to be in memory, so it's not going to last that long, but I'm going to be able to name the table rather than it just sort of somehow getting a name on its own. And that's what this like dunder table name is. So that is a double underscore table name, then double underscore again, and I'm just explicitly naming the table that I'm making. So I called it messages, small m. Okay. And it can be, I'm making it different than the class name. Okay. And then I have my two columns, my two fields, my two properties, however, whatever you want to call it here. And one of them is ID. It's all part of the class, so it's indented from the class definition. I'm defining ID as a column. It's a property, a field, a column of my database. It has an integer value. And then I am specifying that the ID is the primary key. So that's a concept from database. The primary keys should be unique and are a way to find the records, to identify and find records. And then the message is another field, another column, and it is string valued. So that's 29 through 30, and that is the definition of this message class. We're getting ready to create the metadata for this. So if you're thinking, if you know some database, then behind the scenes, there might be some SQL statements. We're not going to write any explicit SQL statements. That's what SQLAlchemy is for us to write more Python code that has some correspondence to the SQL, but that we're not responsible for writing the SQL. The SQLAlchemy will do that. But if you were writing SQL, there would be SQL statements for creating the table with these properties and these data types and so on. And that information about, that's not explicit, it's not a message. It's not the hello world message, but it is the data that says, I have a message and I have an ID and the name of the table is, so all that kind of stuff is the data about the data, or what we call the metadata. So we're setting up the metadata for what we defined above. And most of this is just comments, me saying these things that I'm telling you. And now here is us using the sort of basically the constructor of that class. So message, I am making a message and explicitly assigning the message property to be hello world, what else? And then I just assigned it a name out here. So this is the sort of the class, the constructor. This is some specific data. I have message and message and message. This is the name of the field. This is the name of the table, or actually the class, and there will be a corresponding table. And then here's just some local name that I decided to call it. I could have made this like my message or the message or something. This was, again, the name of my class. This was the name of my property. So there's some redundant use of the name here, but all these three messages are distinct things. Okay, I'm not specifying the ID. When you have an ID, and if it's an integer, then you can skip assigning it, and the database system that SQLAlchemy and SQLite will get together and they will auto increment. So they'll give you it's probably 1 based rather than 0 based, but if you assign the first thing an ID of 1 and the next thing an ID of 2. You can put in your own explicit IDs if there's a situation where that's preferable, but you don't have to. So I decided here not to. When I'm connecting with this Python to the database, and then maybe later getting things out of the database, so I'm relating this sort of Python environment to a database. And in some situations, that could even be on different computers or something. So I have to set up a session to sort of connect to my database. And so that's what we're doing next. We're sort of establishing a session. So that's what all this 58 through 61 is, getting a session for this database. Okay. And then I created above a message, a record, the Hello World record, and I am using this session to add that record. So this is the sort of equivalent to an insert if you know SQL. And then I have to commit. That's a common database concept of like things don't really happen over in the database and be made permanent. This is an in-memory database, so it's not that permanent, but things don't get made, changes aren't made to the database unless you commit. So there's our commit. That idea is also here because we're working with the database, so we have to keep to sort of at least basic database ideas. And then another database idea is to query the database. So again, we use the session, we use our connection to the database. We are querying the message. It's just it's the table, the message table. And that is getting, and we're querying it and getting results. So this in generically will be records, sort of a set of records. Now, at this stage, we only have one record in there, and we know that, but the system in general is returning a list, a set of records. And so I can take that query, which normally would be a list of things, and put in this dot first, and that will grab the first one, in this case, the only one, and then I can sort of print it out. So I'm printing out the message property of that row, which was the first row of this set of things when we queried the table. So basically, this was sort of like select star from message, and then we grabbed the first record and then printed out the message property. There's also an ID property that we're not doing anything with. And actually, there's also some hidden properties that we'll encounter another day. So that was my first, made the database, created a message, inserted the message, committed it, queried it, and just printed it back out here. So we've gone sort of back and forth, used our session, go back and forth with the database. Here I'm using this sort of constructor to making another database. Again, the ID is auto incremented, so this will be 2 and then 3 and then 4. And they are all being added, and then I commit, and those messages go in. And now I'm querying the message. Again, it's a simple database. It's only got the one table. So I'm querying that table, select star from message effectively. This time I'm taking my query and I'm getting all the results. So now I have a list, and then I'm using Python in 90 to loop over the list. So results is all the results of the query, all the rows, if you will. And so item then is a given message, and it has, again, the properties of ID and message. So then I'm taking this print statement over and over again in the for loop and inserting the item ID and the item message. So let's finally then just go and run this. And here's our result down here. Here's the original. We put in hello world and we queried hello world, and then we put in the other messages, and then we looped over all the results after we put in the 3 additional messages, and we looped over all of the results and got the ID and the message, and there they all are. So this was a very basic example of getting the database set up in the first place. Again, this is an in-memory database, so as soon as I close, it's going to go away, but set up, bring in the ability to make a database, then start bring in specific things that we're going to use. So we're not using any other types, so don't bother bringing them in. We're using integers and strings, and we are going to have columns. Make our simple database class here, set up the ID and the message, establish the ID as the primary key, create that all that metadata for it, create a message, set up a session, insert that message and commit, query, get the first one and print it, add more, commit, query, this time get them all, loop over those results, those records. That's what I want to show you. Just a nice Hello World intro to SQLAlchemy. Thanks for your attention.